Hey guys, so I'm not going to do the usual plug, spiel and all that. You know exactly what to do. All I'm going to say is if you want to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, the links will be in the description and on the homepage of my YouTube channel. So if you guys want to check those out and everything, please go ahead and do so. Going to those links helps me out tremendously. Because basically you can see what my content is outside of YouTube and all that, and also you can look into certain stores and affiliated stores that will be listed. Again, helps me out tremendously. And also doing this, as I usually mention before I get to the topic, the comment section on the live video premiere and afterwards will be open. The live chat will be open. Super chats are going to be open, and so will super thanks after the video premiere is over if you don't get here in time for the video premiere. And the reason I'm doing this, of course, is those of you that have followed me, we're going on what's going to be, believe it or not, it's going to be 18 years. Yeah, it's going to be 18 years this year. You guys kind of understand why I'm kind of in a hurry, those of you that have followed me for so long. But anyway, I wanted to just come on here because, I'm kind of surprised about something. Now, everybody obviously loved the firefighter Greg Anatomy spinoff, Station 19, right? Everybody loved it. Now, I didn't get to see it myself. I can catch up on it anytime on Hulu, and I'm guessing Disney Plus and all that. But, it got canceled a couple years ago, basically back 2 years ago, a year and a half, due to the fact that Disney/ABC had acquired 911, the other firefighter drama series from Fox. Fox had canceled it. ABC, Disney picked it up. And that's something that's happened throughout the course of television history. If one network cancels a show, just because, they feel it's run its course and everything, another network will pick it up and say, hey, we still see some potential in you. We'll take you on instead. And that's what happens. That's what happens. Even in animation, it's happened. Throughout, Saturday morning cartoon history. But what's interesting, though, about this is when I went on X, I had people telling me, about certain things, certain, moments in certain series and all that. And they would even suggest I check out certain, X.com, Twitter.com pages dedicated to these moments. And I would do that. I would just check them out of curiosity. And if they asked me to follow them, I would follow them just to see if, they're going to keep up, to date with what's going on. Well, yeah, they do keep up to date with what's going on. They do kind of add on new content and everything to kind of let you know, hey, this stuff is out there, especially even with over-the-air linear broadcast television and cable, channels. But linear over-the-air broadcast. And the reason I say that is because Station 19 had a LGBTQ relationship between two characters. Those characters were, from what I looked up just out of curiosity, those two characters were, and let me make sure I get this right, about them. Those two characters were Maya and Carina. And basically, they, from what I understood, I had to look this up, guys, because I was shocked. I was shocked, how basically very intimate the two actresses, playing these characters, would get with each other. How intimate, how, I guess you could say, very, almost, I would say, late night Showtime, rated R, very hard PG-13 rating that this would go. Now, I understand the show was probably rated TV-14. I get that. But you don't really see, as far as I knew, you don't really see, TV-14, kind of borderlining, razor edging into TV-MA territory. But yet, with this Maya and Carina relationship, they were doing that. And basically on a show that was being broadcast in prime time on linear over-the-air broadcast television, thus, aka, ABC, thus kind of really being a surprise to a lot of people that probably tuned in and didn't expect, to see that. Now, true, they didn't really cross any real borders, if you will, if you know what I mean. They didn't really cross any real borders, but still, it was like you see this and you're kind of like in shock. I mean, I'm like, I'm just googling just out of curiosity, like how much did they get away with, or at least kind of underlying get away with. And I was surprised of how many scenes were like, well, as long as they're not showing anything, I guess it's passable. But still, it's like, holy crap. But you know what really got my attention about it? This group I told you about that I'm following, out of suggestion, just out of curiosity. This one group put up a clip from from the last season, or one of the last two seasons, and it was of the two characters, Maya and Carina, having shower you know what with each other. Yeah, getting intimate in the shower, doing the hot steamy shower deal. And true, they did not show any parts, if you know what I mean, but they gave off the illusion that they could get to that point. It was very borderline. And when I further read, on about the series, because it wasn't just this, relationship and the fact that they were able to get away with this in that show, the way they did. But I also was curious about Station 19 because I had heard about it. I was like, when I saw what some of this stuff was from, among other things, I was like telling myself, wait a minute, I've heard of this show, I've heard of it, but I've never seen it that much, but I've heard of it, and I knew exactly when I heard about it, or I heard about it, but when I read, what the title of the show was, and reminded myself that I had heard about it. I also reminded myself that it was on ABC, it was on ABC. So what happened is I looked up on it and I found out that it was canceled a little over a year and a half ago, back in 2024. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, it was canceled due to basically the fact that, they were bringing on in the, formerly Fox firefighters drama 911, but also, ladies and gentlemen, there was reports that there was some budget cuts that need to be made, and the Greg Anatomy spinoff was one of those shows that got cut, as part of those budgets. But there was also some behind-the-scenes issues as well, mostly with a controversial script that had a racial slur in there that wouldn't have passed, period, in today's standards. And I thought about all of this I was reading about why it was canceled, the budgets, the controversial script, some behind-the-scenes issues, that this and that and so on. And the one thing that just stuck in my mind was, is ABC Disney is not telling you everything. They're not telling you everything because they don't want to be embarrassed. And my opinion is this. When you create a show, you can do whatever you want, right? You can, make sure borderlines doesn't go past, but borderlines, walks the razor's edge and all that when it comes to certain content. But as long as it stays in that lane, on those lanes. To me, I think what happened is that we know that Greg's Anatomy was kind of very similar in tone. A lot of people said there were some moments in there that were kind of like borderline, razor's edge, walking the razor's edge kind of deal, but still passable, and that's good. That's good. That's what made Greg's Anatomy popular, the fact that they took it and focused on the story and everything, but also had moments in there that, made you wonder whether or not this was going to be going a little too far in showcasing what they were showcasing. But basically, when I look at this, I'm like, this is a little bit further than what I've heard Greg's Anatomy would go. Some of these scenes, especially the shower scene. I'm thinking this is going a little too far. It's almost like the kind of stuff you would see on Showtime late at night, if you will. No offense. And I thought about again, all that stuff I read about the show being canceled and why. And I said to myself, they're not telling the whole truth. ABC Disney's not telling the whole truth. The production people behind the series is not telling the whole truth. And I think the reason being is not because it's not because of everything that was mentioned as the real reasons, and I have no doubt they were. I think the other reason is because they became a little too risque. They became a little too, I guess you could say, comfortable in their shoes to basically showcase certain moments and everything between, let's say, the Maya and Carina character and others, if you will. They got a little too comfortable, in their shoes, that they didn't realize that, hey, we might be crossing a line here with this one particular scene. And my thought, honestly, is that scene, maybe along with a few others that we don't know of, or maybe other some controversial scenes in the seasons, past, and at that time they found out about cancellation. I think those led entirely to the show's cancellation as well. I don't think it was just everything from budget cuts and controversial scripts and all that and everything else. Okay, sorry about the long pause there, guys. It's been a couple of hours since I have paused, since I did pause and everything. But like I was saying, primarily, you know, I was just, I think like anybody was kind of surprised, at how, Razor's Edge, on the border that they were doing things, and I think honestly, like I was trying to say, um, I believe I'm not saying that they're not lying, that all the behind the scenes, budget cuts and this and that and the acquisition of 911 and everything, from Fox and onto ABC. I'm not saying any of that, along with like the controversial potential script stuff and behind the scenes issues and everything. I'm not saying that none of that played into the cancellation, and everything of the show. But I think when you look at what they were doing with some of the relationships, mostly like, let's say, the Maya and Karina relationship, um, and how far they were going with them, especially in especially in the latter seasons, and certain intimate moments like the shower scene. Um, I think honestly that did kind of, along with some other things, did contribute. Some other on-screen decisions that somehow got passed and everything, past the censors, I think they did contribute, but you're not going to hear that from ABC or Disney or anybody, because if they were to come out and admit, yeah, along with everything else that we've told you, those things as well kind of caused the show to go belly up. If they come out and admit that, then it just proves that it just proves to everybody that you can't believe a word they're saying. When it comes to the cancellation of any shows that came before Station 19's cancellation, or may come afterwards, or have come afterwards. So I think honestly, just my opinion. I think honestly that you know had if they had not decided, hey, we want to, the production company behind Station 19, not decided to take it a step further than what they did with Greg's Anatomy, which this is a spinoff of. Because Greg's Anatomy, like I said earlier, had their moments too. They had their moments too. Don't get me wrong. Um, but I think had they not decided to take it a step further with Station 19, and really walk that fine razor's edge, very thin, fine line razor's edge, and very thin line, borderline, if you will, with what they were doing, with certain intimate romantic moments, LGBTQ or not. I think Station 19 probably would have been, salvaged. I think Station 19 would have survived and not been canceled, you know, because obviously ABC, Disney, they know the production company behind them. They know it has a fan base, and fans even to this day want to see it come back. And if it does, all power to the fans for making that happen. But we'll see. According to reports, those behind the scenes feel like it's run its course and it's time to move on. But again, you hear that too, and you're like, well, wait a minute. If it ran its course, then why is there so many moments that were left, hanging? Like, what's going on? What was going to happen? What's going on with this character? What's going on with that character? Like, what direction were you going to go with, this story and stuff, or this plot line? You had those kind of things, pretty much just cliffhanged, at the very end, and people still are curious about them. And yet the excuse is, outside of the budget cuts and the acquisition of 911 and all that stuff, that there is truth to it. Don't get me wrong, but when you hear the people say, "Oh, things ran its course," but yet it contradicts everything you saw previously, um, just like with any show, you would want to have a resolution. You'd want to see and have some resolution, and we didn't get that. I don't think, not well, like I said, I never watched the show, but I knew about it. I knew about where it was. As soon as I saw the name, I was like, I think I know where that show's from. I think I know where it aired, and of course, confirmed and everything through research that it was ABC. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is, you say everything's run its course, but yet you have every moment of stuff that's just hanging on, by a finger on a cliff, or hanging on, on a cliff, in a cliffhanger situation, so to speak. And people are like, well, you say this, but you're contradicting what you started to kind of started to build upon, in the show before, as you canceled it. So to me, I think honestly, if a continuation of Station 19 does happen, they're gonna have to get picked up by either HBO Max or Paramount Showtime, if you will. They're gonna have to get picked up by one of them, maybe even Netflix, you know, or what's the other one? They got Paramount, you got Netflix, HBO Max, Peacock, I think. Any one of them, out there, I think is gonna, be the answer to a revising in a, continuation of the show. That's what I think. So either Netflix, either HBO Max, either Paramount Showtime, if you will, or Comcast Peacock, if you will. Um, I feel that they're going to be, one of them anyway, that steps up and says, "Hey, we'll take you on board. We'll help you finish out what you should have finished out, originally, and everything, and basically give some finality, period, to the show." So it'll probably be up to them, because that way, and even Prime Video, that's the other one as well. Even Prime Video, it'll be up to one of those services, like I said, to pick them up if if people truly want to see the show come back, and the people that worked on the show want to see it, get some kind of like final closure, if you will. Then I think it's going to be up to one of those streaming services to do so, and thus by doing so, it would give them a little bit more leeway to, not only walk that razor's edge they were walking on, during the broadcast on ABC, but overstep it, if not cut it, and go as far as they want to go. Especially, let's say, with an LGBTQ relationship that was focused on the show, like Myra and Carina's, So, but yeah, in closing, I do believe, some of the reports that say it was budget, it's the acquisition of 911, it was, controversial script rejection, and some behind the scenes issues maybe with production and the actors and all that. I do believe that, and maybe even the network, I do believe that. But I also believe it was due to the risky content, the risque content, the intimate romantic scenes, LGBTQ wise with Myra and Carina and others. I think it was those moments, those intimate moments, I think, that were borderline, very walking the very fine razor's edge, if you will, that, in my opinion, caused the show to get canceled. That's just my opinion, though. That's just my opinion. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat. Don't forget to like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. And click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, and to support me outside of YouTube as well. Again, I do apologize for the long pause and everything between when I started this and after, but yeah, that's what happens when you're in the situation I'm in for the past, 18, almost 18 years. And a lot of you that have followed me for 18 years, you know what that is. But still, let me know what your guys' thoughts are down below, like I said, in the comments, if you haven't already, in the live chat. And until next time, I will talk to y'all later.